Good evening, you watching India First. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Our top story comes from Canada. Horrific gangland-style killings reported in Canada. A 41-year-old Indian-origin man was shot dead. Harpreet Singh Uppal was an alleged gang leader in Edmonton in British Columbia. Sadly, his 11-year-old son was killed in this shooting. The Indian-origin man and son were killed in cold blood outside a mall and petrol pump in Canada. And sadly, this isn't an isolated incident. Just last week, another Indian-origin Canadian, Paramveer Chahal, a 27-year-old, was shot multiple times in downtown Toronto. He too died on the spot. Are these two incidents linked? There are reports of a massive spike in gang wars, in drug wars, and the alleged Khalistani link that India has repeatedly cautioned Canada about. We get you much more on this big story, but as always, let's get started with the headlines on India First. Prime Minister Narendra Modi mocks Rahul Gandhi in state of war. Madhya Pradesh says the Congress will promise gold that comes from potatoes. Rahul Gandhi hits back, accuses the BJP of being anti-OBC. Air quality in the national capital deteriorates after Diwali. AQI above 500 in many parts of the national capital reaches the hazardous level. Delhi government blames firecrackers for this pollution. BJP hits back, calls the Aam Aadmi Party statement shameful. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak sacks his Home Secretary Suella Braverman. She was accused of stoking tensions and calling pro-Palestine protests hate marches. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar meets the newly appointed British Foreign Secretary. Cameron congratulates him on his appointment. Deadliest phase of Israel's war on Hamas. War rages near Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. Newborns at risk, taken out of incubators. Israel claims the hospital is actually the Hamas underground operations headquarters. Our top story on India First is the shocking gangland killings in Edmonton, Canada, where a 41-year-old suspected drug don of Indian origin, Harpreet Singh Uppal, was shot dead. Sadly, his 11-year-old son was also shot dead outside a mall and a petrol station in Edmonton. There was another 11-year-old in the car. Fortunately, he managed to get out alive and run away from the scene of crime unharmed. These images that you see on your television screen have been released by the Edmonton Police Department in Canada, and I want to for a moment go full frame on these images. Police believe these CCTV images are of that 41-year-old man who was being trailed in a black BMW. In these images, you will see a black-colored BMW X6. A shooter is believed to have stepped out of the BMW when Uppal's car was parked outside the mall and petrol pump. The man identified Uppal. Watch these images carefully. That's that black BMW. A man walks out of that BMW, opens fire and kills Uppal. What the Canadian police have described as sick and twisted is the fact that the shooter then shot at and killed the 11-year-old child. This wasn't a crossfire. The child wasn't killed accidentally. The killer is suspected to have aimed at that child and killed him. Before I get you more on this big story, let's quickly listen in to the Edmonton police.
When I say targeted, in our world, especially when we're dealing with, gangsters, what we mean by that is like Mr. Uppal, we absolutely believe he was targeted in the sense that he was followed with the intention of finding him and ending his life. And it happened. With a young boy, his son, we don't know yet. And I hope we learn for sure that it wasn't the case, that he was followed with the intention of killing him. So we don't know that he was targeted in that sense. But what we do know, and sadly, is that once the shooter or the shooters learned that the son was there, they intentionally killed him, shot and killed him. So he was not caught in a crossfire or killed by mistake.
Last week, a 27-year-old man of Indian origin, Paramveer Chahil, was shot at multiple times and killed in the parking lot of his building in downtown Toronto. Police are currently investigating whether these killings are linked and part of a wider gang war for supremacy in Canada. Police believe that these gangs are organized and have access to sophisticated weapons. Also under investigation at this stage is that black BMW X6 XUV that was used to track and kill Uppal and his son. That BMW was located some distance away. It had been set on fire. Now, was that to destroy evidence? Let's listen into the Toronto police on the killing of the 27-year-old man, Paramveer Chahil, that man of Indian origin. That was last week.
Approximately 7:17 p.m. this evening, officers responded to a shooting call at the address behind me, which is 388 Yonge Street. When they arrived on scene, they found a male to have been shot in the underground parking of this address. The underground parking is a shared parking between 388 and 386 Yonge Street. At this time, there's very little I can give you because we're very early in the investigation. What we're asking for is help from the public. Anybody who witnessed this incident or has dash cam video, we ask that they come forward and call 416-808-5200 or 416-222-TIPS. At this point, I can tell you that the male was pronounced deceased and was shot multiple times. We believe that the incident occurred in the underground parking and that the male was targeted. So we don't believe that there is any risk to the public, and we at this time have no suspect information.
Is Canada's dirty underbelly being exposed by these gang wars and killings? Joining me for more on this big story, Terry Milewski is a senior Canadian journalist and author. Blood for Blood, 50 years of global Khalistan project. Ambassador Vivek Kaju is former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, and he's dealt with Canada and its inaction on Khalistan terror closely. Also with me is India Today's Shiv Arur, who's been tracking developments on the story very, very closely. Shiv, I want to begin by asking you, the Canadian police rightly described the latest killing, especially that 11-year-old child, as sick and twisted. But what more do we know about these gang wars and these gangland-style killings in Canada?
Well, this was a terrifying gangland hit, of a senior functionary, a senior gangster of a gang called the Brothers Keepers Gang. This is one of the most prominent Khalistani Indo-Canadian organized crime groups operating in Canada that spread their tentacles to other places. Harpreet Uppal is this 41-year-old gangster who was shot dead in his car in Edmonton, along with his 11-year-old son. The most horrifying part of this case, Gaurav, is that the 11-year-old son was known to be in the vehicle, and the attackers apparently decided to eliminate him as well. So the child was shot at point-blank range, completely in violation of any sort of sacred code that gangsters operate under to spare children. So that shows you the kind of brutality, cruelty, ruthlessness with which these Khalistani gangs are operating under. And the killing of Harpreet Uppal, he himself, a murderous gangster who's had a hit order on him in the past as well, is part of the Brothers Keepers Gang, which is infamous for all variety of organized crime, from extortion, to contract killing, to many other things, beyond just British Columbia, which has been the preserve and the bastion of some of these gangs. But being killed far away in Alberta, another infamous gangster called Paramveer Chahil was killed in Toronto. Before that, there were two more. So in a span of a couple of weeks, 4 senior level gangsters of some of these groups have been killed. So this is gangland violence going completely out of control in Canada. Handgun related crimes seeing a big spike in Canada as well. And it's the talk of the town in the Canadian press, or
Okay.
at least, should I say, a section of the Canadian press.
Okay. But let's try and understand this more. Terry Milski, police suspect Uppal, was a Don, as Shiv was describing, with the Brothers Keepers gang. There had been an attempt on his life earlier. There were reports of multiple gangs operating in the British Columbia, United Nations gang, Red Scorpion gang, Brothers Keepers. Sir, how serious is this threat of gang war and their alleged link to Khalistan in Canada?
Well, it's extremely serious, Gaurav, for obvious reasons, but it's not new. These ties between Khalistani elements and gangland elements are of long standing and they're deep. We know that they seem to be two sides of the same coin. The affiliation with Khalistani separatism among a small minority of the Indian diaspora in Canada, and the depth of those links includes, for example, the late Rapudaman Singh Malik,
Yes.
A prominent suspect in the Air India case. He was the financier of the Baba Khalsa, the terrorist group which blew up the Kanishka in 1985, as you well know. He was murdered in a similar gangland hit. He's at the wheel of his car, masked men burst out of the bushes, shoot him dead, run off, then you find the getaway car in flames after that. Same thing a year later with Hardeep Nijjar in Surrey, British Columbia, another locus of these gangland wars, where there's been a shooting almost every other weekend, it seems, in the last couple of years. And in that case, the Malik camp was suspected of exacting revenge upon the Nijjar camp because the Nijjar camp was suspected of getting rid of, eliminating its rival in Mr. Malik, who had achieved a rapprochement with the Indian government, apparently. He had written a gushing letter. This is a former financier of the Baba Khalsa,
Yes.
a terrorist organization, a Khalistani terrorist organization, who apparently flipped at the age of 75 and wrote a gushing letter to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, thanking him for the wonderful things he had done for the Sikhs. The Indian government was now a great friend of the Sikhs, which was regarded as a betrayal by Malik's former Khalistani allies. Now, sorry for the complicated story, but it is a complicated story. But here's what comes out of it, is that we are now in the midst of a diplomatic row
Yes.
of unprecedented severity between Canada and India, are we not? And guess what? The theory of the Canadian government that the Indian government was somehow involved in the murder of Mr. Nijjar has been poo-pooed by the Indian government. They call it motivated, they call it absurd. Well, it suddenly doesn't seem quite so absurd if you blend the two competing theories on the murder of Nijjar. The one theory that it was a government hit by the Indian government, and the second theory that it was a gangland hit by the Malik camp to get revenge.
Where is the evidence in public domain? Where is the evidence is the question. And let me take that to Ambassador Kaju. Let me take that to Ambassador Kaju before I come back to you. In the Nijjar case, Ambassador Kaju, India was blamed by Justin Trudeau, but was that just to cover up this dirty underbelly of gang wars and the facade of Khalistan behind drugs and weapons and human trafficking in Canada, sir?
Let me take forward the argument that Terry is making. But before that, let me make the point that organized crime is not an exclusive Canadian problem. Organized crime is a problem all over. There are organized gangs all over the world. The problem arises when organized crime gets mixed with political separatism, as in Canada. And Terry himself is saying that organized crime has been used and has has propelled, it's an interactive thing, with Khalistani groups. Now, India has been telling Canada for decades that, look, please take Khalistani separatism seriously. And what is surprising is that even though Khalistani separatism is mixed up, and as Terry himself is saying, and he's an authority on this
He's an
subject,
authority, yeah.
with organized crime, yet for some strange reason, the Canadians are refusing to do so. And Trudeau, instead of giving lectures to India and finger pointing, has to introspect. And this terrible crime involving a young 11-year-old boy,
Yes.
which is barbaric, should compel that introspection in the Canadian political class and in their security class. Unfortunately, it is not doing so. Because even while this is it is carrying on, the Canadian Prime Minister continues on his tirade against India, even though he says that he does not want to fight India. Now, he says Canada is a
Rule of law
a country
country.
of laws.
Yeah.
It's a country which is devoted to the rule of law. Now, if that is so, then how has Canada permitted, and what action has Canada taken to eliminate this nexus between organized crime, between these gangland killings
Yes.
in gangs, and Khalistan?
Let me
What
take
has
that-
Canada done on that?
Absolutely.
That
Let
is
me
a
take that to
question
Terry
that
once again.
The Indian government has been putting
Absolutely.
to the
You know,
Canadians, and it is refusing to answer that question.
yeah, Terry Milski, India has repeatedly warned Canada about drugs, weapons, human trafficking activities of these Khalistani gangs. Is there then merit in India's contention that these groups just use the name of Khalistan? That's a facade to carry out their nefarious activities.
Yes, they use the Khalistan flag, Khalistan Zindabad. They fly the flag as a cover for illegal activities. And Vivek is correct that India has been complaining about these problems and giving specifics to Canada in very many cases for 40 years now, while Canada has said, oh, well, it's your problem. It's not really our problem. We're not going to do much about it. It's not really affecting us. It's gang wars between, gangsters wiping out other gangsters. Why should we care? Well, of course, this keeps coming back to bite Canada in many respects. There are far too many bullets that go astray and hit bystanders. And this latest example is a particularly horrific one. I mean, it wasn't a bullet that went astray, of course. It was aimed at this 11-year-old boy. But horrors like this have been occurring for decades now in Canada. And it is true that India has very frequently warned Canada, not just about this kind of thing, drugs, human trafficking as well. There's been welfare fraud, immigration fraud on a massive scale. And Canada has not taken it seriously for a very long time. Now,
why?
They suddenly realize that it's coming back to bite us. And the Prime Minister has apparently got the idea that the theory put about by Khalistanis that if any Khalistani dies anywhere, it must be the result of a murder by the Indian state. And the Prime Minister seems to have adopted this theory in the case of Mr. Nijjar. And guess what? He may be right that there is a link between the Malik camp, which had been very friendly with the Indian government in recent times, strategically for its own reasons, and whoever pulled the trigger in the case of the murder of Nijjar. It's not impossible that there is a connection between the two theories that I laid out a moment ago, namely, one, that it was the Indian government that
even if that is a theory,
the gangsters did it.
Even if there is a theory, there has to be evidence, there has to be investigation. Even if this is a theory, who pulled the trigger? The government in Canada doesn't know who pulled the trigger. Who ordered the hit? Government of Canada knows nothing about it. And you go and blame a country that you claim, that Canada claims is a friendly country. It just sounds very bizarre. But I want to understand, why would Canada not take action against these Khalistanis when Kanishk was bombed, and you've written a book on it? Why would Canada not take action against the bombers of Kanishk? Why would they not take action when an 11-year-old child has been killed, not in crossfire, but directly? A weapon was aimed at the child to kill him by these gangsters, and they have no idea. Canada government has no idea who the gangster is, sir.
Well, the short answer as to why Canada hasn't done anything over many years now is that, as I say, Canadians don't think it's our problem. They think it's an Indian problem. We don't have to be concerned of it because we're not in the line of fire. It's other gangsters who are in the line of fire, so who cares? And a lot of people in Canada are prepared to believe, well, if the Indian government was somehow involved in wiping out Mr. Nijjar in Surrey on June the 18th, good for them. We're not shedding any tears for a dead terrorist. And many Indians feel the same way, do they not? That if this happened, why should Canada complain about it? Well, it's history now. We have complained about it. The Canadian Prime Minister has brought this up to the Indian Prime Minister, and there's been hell to pay. And the two sides are now at each other's throats. But what I'm saying to you is that I think Canadians are now going to get the message. You know, when they see an 11-year-old boy gunned down in a gang war, this is going now we see how we are going to be affected, and with luck, this will convey the message in a way that previously Canadians just haven't got it. They just think it's this goes all the way back to the Air India case, where Canadians thought, well, it's an Indian plane, a lot of Indians on the plane. They were mostly Canadian citizens, and we didn't get it. So maybe now we'll get it.
Well, 320 people lost their lives, and unfortunately, Justin Trudeau's dad, who was Prime Minister of England, didn't get that message. But will the killing of this 11-year-old Canadian of Indian origin send across that message? Ambassador Karju, has the killing of Nijjar actually blown the lid of this very sick and twisted Khalistani cover to drugs, weapons and human trafficking coming to the fore once again with the killing of Uppal and his 11-year-old son and that Chahal fellow?
Gaurav, I'm deeply pained as a human being to hear what Terry has said. That it takes the killing of an 11-year-old child for Canadians, and I'm sorry to use this word, Caucasian Canadians, to understand the severity of what and the gravity of what India has been telling Canada for decades.
Yes.
What is this approach? I have used this term most reluctantly.
Yes.
And most, with pain. But this is racist. Terry, are many Canadians, and please be honest, are many Canadians racist? That because Nijjar has been killed, because an 11-year-old child has been killed 40 years ago, that plane came down with 320 Canadian nationals, but the color of their skin was not white. And therefore, the Canadian authorities and the Canadian public did not take it seriously. That is the point I've been making continuously, and Terry has not been answering it.
Okay, I have the last 30 seconds on this part of the broadcast, but Terry, would you want to respond to that, sir?
Let me just say this. I've been working on this story basically for 40 years, since even before the Air India bombing. And I have been prominent among those who have suggested, tactfully as I can, and sometimes more bluntly, that the Air India families have a reasonable and proper grievance when they've complained that they detected some racism in the way in which the investigation of the Kanishka bombing was handled in such a lackadaisical way. The police didn't seem to care. The government didn't seem to care. They thought of it continually as an Indian problem. That includes, by the way, the neglect of the interests of the Caucasian passengers on that plane. It wasn't just that we didn't care about the brown people who died. We also didn't care about the white people who died on that plane. And by the way, the Sikh Khalistanis who blew up the plane didn't care about the 33 Sikhs who were on that plane.
But that's a
was
serious
somebody
charge,
else's
but
problem.
that was 40 years ago. Does that attitude
Yes,
remain even today? And is that why Justin Trudeau's government is taking no action against these Khalistani elements and blaming India instead? I've run out of time on this part of the show, but I would love to have you back on the show with me in the days ahead as we track the story very, very closely. Terry Milski and Ambassador Kaju, as always, for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks. A quick break. Election Unlocked with Rajdeep Sardesai up next. Stay with us.
You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a BNP Group company.
Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant. Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant. Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant. Colors by Cola makes you wish everything was as vibrant.
Bloodshed continues in Israel and Gaza Strip. Israel has been relentlessly launching airstrikes on the Palestinian enclave. Sadly, the misery of war has engulfed civilians in Gaza. Israeli bombing at the Al-Shifa hospital has really worsened the crisis. Explosions rung out when women and children trudged down the road in order to flee northern Gaza as the war only deepens. Meanwhile, the joint Arab-Islamic summit hosted by Saudi Arabia called for immediate cessation of military operations in Gaza Strip. The world is still divided over the deadly Israel-Hamas war. Pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel protests have erupted across the globe. In UN, India votes in favor of a resolution that condemns Israeli settlement activities in the occupied Palestine. Israel is meanwhile fighting a multi-front war facing Hezbollah along the Lebanon border. Cross-border attacks continue unabated while it's the innocent civilians ultimately who continue to pay the price. Bureau Report, India Today.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com. You are watching India Today, powered by Finest, Be Sustainable Change, a BNP Group company.
Co-presented by
आपका जॉय भारत का जॉय जॉय ई-बाइक
Co-powered by
पारुल यूनिवर्सिटी वडोदरा गुजरात
Hello and welcome. You're with the Election Unlocked, our show where we bring you all that's happening on the election campaign trail in Battleground 2023. First, before anything else, the headlines on the Election Unlocked. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hits out at the Chhattisgarh Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel over the Mahadev betting app scandal. Asks if Mahadev is sending money to Delhi.
जांच एजेंसियों के छापों में रुपयों के ढेर पकड़े गए हैं। यहां के मुख्यमंत्री के करीबी जेल में बंद है।
In state of war, Madhya Pradesh, Rahul Gandhi hits back at Prime Minister Modi, accuses the BJP of being anti-OBC. The OBC factor is still the Congress's key plank for Rahul Gandhi at least.
अब जैसे ही मैंने नरेंद्र मोदी जी से कहा पार्लियामेंट में कि भैया एक काम कीजिए, ये जाति जनगणना कर लीजिए, जनगणना की बात, जाति जनगणना की बात नरेंद्र मोदी जी के मुंह से नहीं निकलती।
Politics also escalates in Telangana over the Congress's minority declaration. The BRS says the Congress is betraying minorities. OAC calls it a poll gimmick. Congress hits back, says KTR trying to mislead minorities. But to our top story, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh set to go to the polls this Friday, and the battle has just got escalated even further. All the heavyweights of political parties are focusing on these two states at the moment, Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh in the heart of India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivering a fiery speech during an election rally in Chhattisgarh, Mungeli district, slamming the Congress government in the state. Addressing the Vijay Sankalp Maha rally, he focused particularly on Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel, accusing him of being involved in the alleged Mahadev betting app scam, where the Enforcement Directorate has linked the Congress leader with an ongoing investigation. Prime Minister Modi saying action will be taken against the corrupt in Chhattisgarh after the BJP comes to power. Meanwhile, Chhattisgarh Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel quick to hit back at the Prime Minister over those corruption allegations against the state government in a scathing attack. He asked the Prime Minister not to be selective. Baghel suggested that the Prime Minister should first take action against former Chief Minister of Chhattisgarh, Raman Singh of the BJP.
यहां विधानसभा उम्मीदवारों को टिकटों देने को लेकर कांग्रेस में जो खेल हुआ है उसके तो ऑडियो चल रहे हैं। एक एक टिकट बेचकर कांग्रेस के नेताओं ने कितने पैसे ऊपर तक पहुंचाए हैं, इसका सच भी जनता के सामने आना चाहिए।
करप्ट पहले है तो मोदी जी से मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि रमन सिंह के पहले खिलाफ कार्रवाई कर लें। वो सेलेक्टिव कार्रवाई न करें। करना है तो हेमंत विश्व शर्मा के खिलाफ कर ले, अजीत पवार के खिलाफ कर ले, और जो लोग जो मोदी वाशिंग पाउडर में धुल के आए ना उस पर पहले कार्रवाई कर ले, उसके बाद फिर बात करें।
Let's turn from Chhattisgarh to Madhya Pradesh, where Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has been focusing a lot of his attention. Today, he slammed Prime Minister Modi over the caste census, calling the BJP anti-OBC. The Prime Minister, in his Chhattisgarh rally, hit back at the Congress, saying that they hate the OBC caste and, despite court orders, refuse to apologize to the OBC community. The caste card is clearly heating up in the poll campaign in the last leg in both states. Listen in to the Prime Minister versus Rahul Gandhi tussle on the OBC census.
जैसे ही मैंने नरेंद्र मोदी जी से कहा पार्लियामेंट में कि भैया एक काम कीजिए, ये जाति जनगणना कर लीजिए, उस दिन के बाद नरेंद्र मोदी जी कहते हैं, भैया भाषण में कहते हैं हिंदुस्तान में कोई जात नहीं है, हिंदुस्तान में सिर्फ गरीब है। और जनगणना की बात, जाति जनगणना की बात नरेंद्र मोदी जी के मुंह से नहीं निकलती। तो मैं आपको यहां गारंटी देना चाहता हूं कि जैसे ही हमारी सरकार दिल्ली में आएगी, नेशनल लेवल का जाति जनगणना हम करके दे देंगे। और मध्य प्रदेश में जैसे ही सरकार आएगी, जाति जनगणना का काम हम मध्य प्रदेश में शुरू कर देंगे।
यहां विधानसभा उम्मीदवारों को टिकटों देने को लेकर कांग्रेस में जो खेल हुआ है, उसके तो ऑडियो चल रहे हैं। एक एक टिकट बेचकर कांग्रेस के नेताओं ने कितने पैसे ऊपर तक पहुंचाए हैं, इसका सच भी जनता के सामने आना चाहिए।
Let's turn from there to the state of Telangana, which is gearing up for elections that will take place there on the 30th. Now, politics has escalated in Telangana over a declaration for minorities made by the Congress party. The BRS is accusing the Congress of actually working against the minorities. The Congress hitting back, alleging that the KCR government is trying to mislead the community. Remember, Telangana has about a 13-14% minority population, and in Hyderabad in particular, the minority vote is crucial. Take a look at how both sides are battling for the support of the minorities.
With Telangana elections fast approaching, the battlefield is filled with heated debates on which is the most credible party for people of the state. In the latest face-off, BRS has cornered the Congress, accusing them of working against minorities. Congress has promised a caste survey in Telangana, on the basis of which minorities will be assured opportunities in government jobs, education, reservation and other sectors. BRS has likened this move to the BJP's ideology, calling this an anti-minority strategy.
आज कांग्रेस पार्टी के डिक्लेरेशन ये कहता है, ये बोलता है कि एक कास्ट सेंसस करेंगे और सभी को इंक्लूडिंग माइनॉरिटीज को हम मिला देंगे बीसीस में। क्या होगा इससे? दोनों का नुकसान होगा। एक तरफ नुकसान होगा बीसीस का, दूसरे तरफ नुकसान हो जाएगा माइनॉरिटीज का। ये आज कांग्रेस पार्टी का मतलब सोच है। कांग्रेस पार्टी का जो सोच है आज बीजेपी का आइडियोलॉजी से मिलता है।
In a bid to consolidate minority votes, the Grand Old Party has presented its minority declaration, which includes Sikh and Christians. They've increased minority welfare budget to 4,000 crore, promised financial aid up to 1 lakh for students completing higher education, monthly honorarium of 12,000 for priests of all religions, schemes for newlyweds, etc.
This is yet another attempt by Mr. KTR to mislead the minorities. I mean, I'm surprised that he lacks the basic sense and understanding of the backward classes and its quota. The categorization of Muslims for reservation is BCE.
You know, when we have given a very strong minority declaration, and I don't think there is anything, if you want to find fault, you can find fault for everything. Whatever their schemes are also, if you can find fault. But I think we are looking at a very positive way. We have given a very positive minority declaration. I don't think there will be any problem. I mean, what they have not done, they are trying to do what